Okay, everybody, today we're going to start by talking about opposites. We've learned since the beginning of the quarter that the opposite of plus is minus, and then the other way around, the opposite of minus is plus. We also learned that the opposite of multiply is divide, and then of course the other way around, the opposite of divide is times. So we called these inverse operations. We're going to learn a new inverse operation. If you have an x squared or any number squared, the opposite of squaring is the square root. One undoes the other. If you ever have a square and you want to get rid of it, your square root will get rid of it. The square root and the square are opposites, so the square root of x squared is just x. Now, I want to talk to you about why this happens and then show you something interesting that happens. If we had a number like 10, 10's a good easy number to be using, and we square it, that would be like 10 times 10. 10 squared equals 100. Now, say we wanted to do the opposite. What if we started with 100 and we wanted to know what the square root of 100 was? Well, that's kind of like saying that 10 times 10 would equal 100. So there's your 10 times 10. We're just taking the square root of that. So the square root of 100, what number times itself would give you 100? That would be 10. The square root of 100 is 10. It really does work backwards. But here's an interesting thing. If I say the square root of 100 really equals the square root of two numbers times themselves, what if I started with negative 10 times negative 10? Well, would negative 10 times itself, negative 10, also be 100? Yeah, it would, because negative times a negative is a positive. So the square root of 100 can also be negative 10. Whenever you take the square root of a number, your answer is always the positive version of that number and the negative version of that number. So we'll show you how that works. Let's solve number 1. You have k raised to the second power, or k squared. So you're going to square root it to get that square to go away. They're opposites. They will cancel each other out. I like to cross out the little corner of the square root and then cross out the square. That shows me that k is all alone. That variable is all alone. And then I can go to my calculator and do the square root of 76. So here in my Desmos Scientific is the square root, and I need 76. And you will see that your answer shows up here and it's a big old decimal. It's okay today to represent this in decimals, and I would like you to do 3 places after the decimal point. So this is 8.717, but you'd cut it off here except for this 4th place after the decimal is bigger than 5. If it is 5 or bigger, the rule is in rounding, it will round up. So if that 4th place is 5 or bigger, it will cause that 3rd place to go up a number. So this is actually 8.718 is your answer here. So 8.718. But as we learned at the very beginning of the lecture, you always have to remember that it is the negative form of that number too. So negative 8.718 is your answer. Okay, let's look at number 3. Kind of the same idea. You have x squared, so use your square root on both sides. Square root cancels out the square, leaves x all alone. And we're going to come on over here, clear what we've done before, and hit our square root button because we want to square root the 21. Okay. Just like the other one, I would like you to take 3 places after the decimal. So it would be 4.582, except the 4th place is a 5. Remember, 5 or bigger will cause that 3rd place to go up. So that'll be 4.583. And just like we learned at the beginning of the lecture, you always get the negative version as well when you take a square root. So negative 4.583 as well. Okay, now let's look at number 5. Number 5 is a bit different because you have something else on that left-hand side with the x squared. You can't take the square root before you get the x squared all alone. So you've got to get rid of that plus 8. So remember your inverse operations and do the opposite of plus, which is minus. So take away that 8 from both sides, left and right. Draw a line because you're done with this step. 8 minus 8 is 0, so I just cross it out. X squared comes down, and 28, take away 8 is 20. Again, the opposite of square is a square root, so square root both sides. And they will cancel each other out, leaving x all alone. And I need to come over here, clear everything, and do the square root of 20. The square root of 20 is 4.472, and the 1 isn't big enough to make it go up, so it's just 4.472. And negative 4.472. Okay. All right, let's look at number 7. Number 7 again is has a variable that's squared, but you can't take the square root until you get rid of everything else. It's called isolating. You have to get that variable squared all alone. So that negative 6 has to go away. Remember, a number right next to a variable means times. So opposite of times is divide. You're going to divide away that negative 6 on the left, and if you do it on the left, you need to do it on the right. Negative 6 cancels negative 6, and that leaves m squared alone. It is now isolated, but I do need to come over here and figure out what's negative 414 divided by negative 6. Clear everything, and negative 414 divided by negative 6. And that's going to be 69. So the opposite of a square is square root. So your last step in all of these is going to be square rooting. So square root cancels out the square, leaves m all alone. One of the ways you can write this, remember you have a positive version and a negative version. One way you might see it is like this, kind of fancy, but plus or minus written on top of each other. That means there's a positive and the negative version. And then you need to come over here and do the square root of 69. And that's 8.306, but the fourth digit is 6. That's bigger than 5, so it'll make that 6 go up 1, so it'll be 8.307. Now, because I have the positive version and the negative version right here in this plus or minus symbol, I don't actually have to write my number twice because this means both. So if you like it this way, you can put it this way. When you are entering your answers in a Canvas quiz, though, you will need to put in the positive version, comma, the negative version. That's how it will accept it from you. But in other venues, other tests, you might see that positive plus or minus symbol. Okay, let's try another one that was a lot like number 5. M squared plus 7. Got to get rid of that 7 before you can do your square root to get m all alone. So subtract. And m squared is all alone now. It's isolated. 88 take away 7 is 81. Ooh, nice perfect square number. You guys will probably remember that 9 times 9 is 81. That's why I say it's a perfect square. But if you did not recognize that, you could still come on over here and do square root of 81, and you're just going to get 9. Nice whole number. You can do 9 comma -9. Remember, you always need the, or if you like it better, just do plus or minus 9, and that's good enough. Unless you're taking a Canvas quiz. Okay, guys, let's look at number 7. Number 7 is, or number 11, sorry, is a lot like number 7 was. Again, you have to get rid of that -7n. There's really a multiplication understood between the -7 and the n. So divide. Opposite of multiply is divide. So divide away the -7, both sides. And that leaves n squared all alone. I'm going to come over here and do my division. So -448 divided by -7. And that is, whoa, I had an extra. Okay. You know what? This is a good lesson, guys. I won't delete this. I want you to notice that I said, whoa, because this didn't make any sense. I knew there was something wrong because I only started with 448 and I divided by 7, so I should have gotten a smaller number. This gave me a bigger number, which was surprising. I hope that you guys are watching for those things and making sure that your answers make sense. If they don't make sense, you probably did something like typed an extra number. See, I typed 4,448. So there's my mistake. I'm going to clear it all. And I'm going to start again with -448 divided by -7. And, oh, I did it again. Crazy pen. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so this is 64. Went in 64 times. You might notice that this is also another perfect square. 64 is 8 times 8. So that's going to be a nice even number. And if you knew that it was 8 times 8, then you knew that the square root of 64 was 8. And remember, it's always plus or minus that answer. You could have put this in Desmos as the square root of 64 and gotten 8 as well. I want to show you one that will be a little bit surprising. So come on up to number 6. Normally I do the odds for you, but one of these evens is interesting, so we should talk about it. Number 6 says -2n squared equals -144. Again, you need to get n squared all alone. So get rid of that 2 by dividing it away. N squared is going to be equal to, and -144 divided by 2 is -72. Now take this over here and go square root, because square root undoes the square. And then I want you to do something. We'll see what Desmos says. This is actually an impossible function to do. So square root of -78. And it says undefined. Undefined. We're going to write no solution. Which kind of means the same thing as undefined. And let's talk about that, why that happens. Remember that 10 times 10 was 100. So the square root of 100 was 10. The square root of 100 was also -10 because -10 times -10 could equal 100. Well, there's no way to make a negative number. So if we wanted to have a -78, there's no number times itself that would give you a negative number. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So whenever you're taking the square root of a negative number, you don't even have to bother right now putting it into the calculator. Later we're going to learn what to do with square roots of negatives, but for right now, please just write no solution. Okay, let's go on to a little bit longer of a problem. And look at number 17. This looks a lot like your two-step equations where you ignore the variable and whatever's closest to it and do the addition or subtraction to get rid of it first. And you're going to do that same thing here. So the opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So subtract 1 from both sides. Whoops, 1, not 7. Draw a line because you're done with that step. 1 minus 1 is 0, so we'll cross it out. And that leaves 7v squared on the left-hand side. 29 minus 1 is 28. Now, we want to get rid of this 7 because we need to have v squared all alone so we can take its square root. So, divide away the 7, which will cancel out that 7, and leave its v squared all alone. 28 divided by 7 is 4. And we have one thing left. You've got to get rid of that square, so you need to square root both sides. Square root gets rid of the square, leaves v all alone. And the square root of 4, 2 times 2 is 4. So the answer here is 2. But remember, it's both positive and negative. So plus or minus 2 is your answer. Okay, so that's how those work. It's really the same process as your regular two-step equation, but remember, you're not done until you take the square root. Let's practice another one like that. Number 19. Remember the variable and whatever's closest to it, so the 2m squared goes last. We have to get rid of that plus 10, so let's subtract 10 from both sides. So 2m squared is the last thing left on that left-hand side, and 210 take away 10 is just 200. Now we're going to divide away the 2, which leaves m squared all alone, and 200 divided by 2 is 100. Now this looks like the problem we began with at the very beginning of our discussion. The opposite of the square is a square root. We're going to square root 100. And of course the square root of 100 is 10. So m equals positive 10, comma, negative 10. Or if you like, you can just write it quickly, plus or minus 10. All right. Good luck with the rest of these. Please do them all so that you can prepare for your quiz at the end of the week. If you have any questions, remember you can always email me for some help. Thanks. Have a great day.